Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tiffany Marley, and I serve as the Project Director for the Learning Communities Resource Center. We are having a little bit of technical difficulties today. We apologize for that. However, we are pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, which is a part of the Learning Communities Resource Center Anti-Poverty Practice Series. And today we will be highlighting the Rural Impact Project, and in particular, 2 cases related to the work of that project. And so with that said, I am happy to start our conversation by directing our attention to the promise of community action, as it truly grounds the work of not only the partnership, but the work of the Learning Communities Resource Center itself. And that promise is community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And as I said, that promise, it truly does ground the work of the Learning Communities Resource Center, as our charge as a project is to analyze community action outcomes and identify those effective, promising, and innovative practices and strategies that alleviate not only the causes but also the conditions of poverty. And at the end of the day, our intent is to build the Community Action Network's capacity so all of you can fight poverty more effectively. And as we do this work, we will give particular emphasis not only to those innovative or promising family-level services, but also community-level strategies that allow the achievement of our national performance indicators that ultimately point to specific outcomes that move the work of our agencies forward and really tell that powerful story of success in a more dynamic way. At the end of the day, it also moves our families forward. And so with that said, today's webinar is a reflection of the work of the Learning Communities Resource Center up to this time. And in particular, during the previous project that spanned between 2015 and 2017, we had several learning community groups that were a part of the project, and we have selected certain ones of those to highlight as a part of this series. And so in the past, as you can see on your screen, we offered learning community groups focused on health intersections, poverty trends, decreasing family homelessness, bundling services to improve outcomes, trauma-informed approaches to alleviating poverty, financial empowerment for families, results at the community level, and Rural Impact, which we are excited to talk with you all about today. And for all the closed groups involved with the project, they all progressed into 4 different phases, starting from formation, going to knowledge building, piloting or implementation as we call it, and then finally practice transformation. And the agencies who moved through those phases, so to speak, really were ultimately in what we call a transformation or a transformative process. And so as a result of identifying an enhancement or change that they wanted to make on a family or community level, we were able to provide those agencies with support that really align very closely, or really align directly, to our performance management structure, ROMA. As many of you have heard of it, results-oriented management and accountability. But agencies would identify those specific needs, so what they needed, and then what that possible change would be, which was the identification of their outcomes, and then what those things they might do to really foster that change or transformation for the program, for the agency, for the community, and ultimately for the families that they serve. And so to say a little bit more about the Rural Impact Project, it was really an initiative of the White House Rural Council, which was facilitated under the Obama administration. And basically the White House Rural Council explored new partnerships and innovative models of service delivery to increase access and take up of key programs in underserved rural places. And so within that initiative, there were several projects that were launched, of which the Rural Impact Project was included. And the Rural Impact Project consisted of a partnership of several entities, the primary or the core group of those partners being federal partners spanning from the White House Rural Council itself to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Labor, the Corporation for National and Community Services, the Appalachian Regional Commission, the Delta Regional Authority, and the U.S. Department, or I did already say the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, but then other federal partners. And from there, the Department of Health and Human Services, particularly the administration for children and families, as well as Health Resources and Services Administration, or we call them HRSA, as well as SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, work together as the lead team within that federal structure to identify resources and provide a frame for this work to play out. And that led to 2 technical assistance providers being identified for the overall project, and the Community Action Partnership being one of those technical assistance partners, along with the American Academy of Pediatrics. And so the partnership and AAP, as we call them, we have worked very, very closely over the course of the last 2 years to provide intensive technical assistance, training opportunities, and various other engagements to support the work of the 10 rural impact sites. And so as you can see here, the rural impact demonstration, rural impact is an acronym that speaks to rural integration models for parents and children to thrive. And the intent is to help communities adopt a 2-generation approach to programs, policies, and systems, and really to provide that whole family framework for addressing child poverty. And the other thing that I would call out as it relates to this initiative is the effort to address child poverty within the rural context in particular. And so there were 10 rural and tribal communities identified, and they received technical assistance, support from federal staff. Each of the sites had access and have access still to AmeriCorps Vista members, access to Pure Learning, coaches. And the important thing to note is while there was a lot of collaboration and effort on the federal side, it wasn't a grant-bearing initiative, meaning the agencies who participated didn't sign up with the intent to receive grants, nor did the feds award grants, but there was and is a lot of resources available to support these activities that you see listed here. And so this provides a view of the landscape of the 10 sites, and those sites cover everywhere from Maryland to Kentucky, Iowa, Mississippi, Ohio, Minnesota, Maine, Arkansas, Utah, and Oklahoma. And you can see all of the 10 sites listed here. And just to talk a little bit about the theory of change for the project, it is if rural and tribal communities are assisted in realigning and restructuring services to serve the whole family and collectively work to intentionally and simultaneously increase the capacity of children and parents, then rural child poverty will be reduced. And so there are several input activities and short and long-term milestones and outcomes that were identified by the project with the ultimate goal of the reduction in rural and tribal child poverty in the 10 identified states. And so, and all of this was undergirded by facts that we already know, and that is that as of 2015, 6.2 million Americans in rural areas lived in poverty, including 1.5 million children, which basically shapes up to be 1 in 4 rural children in America live in poverty. And in these communities, high rates of poverty have persisted, and the complexities of the way poverty manifests itself in the rural landscape call for some unique and very specialized approaches to moving families and communities forward. And over 300 rural counties have had poverty rates of over 20% in every census since 1980. And so it says that as we think about this whole notion of rural poverty, and particularly rural child poverty, it is really an urgent, very acute scenario that we as the Community Action Network can certainly give some particular interest or effort towards, and certainly this project has done that for us as well, the Rural Impact Project. And so this infographic just sort of speaks about not only what I've already mentioned in terms of the statistic of 1 in 4 rural children living in poverty in America, but it also speaks to how our whole family approach is really seeking to move families from poverty to prosperity, and that requires a very coordinated, integrated approach across various domains as we think about the kinds of services that get provided for families, understanding that that happens for the parent and the child at the same time, and that community partnerships are vital in that. And I'll stop there because there will be more said about that in the next part of our presentation. And with that said, I'm happy to pass the baton over to my colleague, Liza, for us.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction, Ms. Tiffany, and for setting the stage to take a closer look at the work that these sites have been doing through the Rural Impact Project over the past over 2 years now. So as Tiffany mentioned, the real key intervention, the promising anti-poverty practice that is highlighted through the Rural Impact Project is this 2-generation approach. That is the focus and the driving change of the work being done in all of these communities. So I think before we take a look at some of the sites' particular work, we can talk a little bit more about what the 2-generation approach is. And before going into that, I just want to kind of take the piece of statistic that Tiffany had highlighted before as our starting point. Is, in particular, that last statistic that she highlighted, that over 300 rural counties in the last 30 years have consistently showed up as impoverished counties in the census. And that really demonstrates the fact that this cyclical nature of poverty in rural areas. And it's particularly that cyclical nature of poverty that the two-generation approach is seeking to interrupt, with the idea being that when children grow up in poverty, they're more likely to end up in poverty as adults and then maintain that cycle. And so in order to move children out of poverty, we need to move the whole family out of poverty and take a whole family approach to doing that, therefore moving the child out of poverty and future generations out of poverty and ending that cycle of poverty that has existed in these rural areas for over 30 years. So this is a graphic that we see from the Aspen Institute Ascend Network, which is a specialized network focusing on two-generation practices across the country. It really shows what the practice is here, taking our siloed services from some services that are particularly child-focused and some that are particularly parent-focused and moving them toward being services that take the whole family into account. So we'll move forward with a little bit more of a description on that, and Tiffany will move the slide forward. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit more about what a two-generation approach is. The idea is really that it provides opportunities to meet the needs of vulnerable parents and their children together. And it intentionally and simultaneously connects high-quality services to children and their parents. And those words are highlighted because those are really the key components of a successful two-generation approach, and especially the two-generation approaches that are becoming more popular now. It's about that intentionality and thought as these programs and policies are being created to serve our families. Simultaneously is a very important aspect, that in each moment that you're serving either a parent or a child, that is simultaneously considering their child or their parent along with them. And high quality, of course, is something that if the services themselves are not high quality, then the interventions will not be successful. And then the goal, of course, is to create a legacy of economic security. So let's talk a little bit more about why a two-generation approach specifically for those rural areas. So some of the reasons why this approach has been taken into consideration for rural areas is because a lot of research has documented that for children themselves, if they are receiving high-quality early child education, that they can help motivate their parents to achieve better outcomes for themselves. And similarly, when parents achieve a certain level of educational attainment, that helps move themselves out of poverty and then is a better predictor of economic mobility for their parents. So this two-generation strategy combines these threads to engage children and parents together to build that mutual motivation to achieve educational and economic outcomes for both parent and child. So we will move forward and take a look at what this has looked like on the ground for some of our sites over the past 2 years. So we'll start with Family Futures Down East, which is a collaborative effort up in Washington County, Maine. Washington County, Maine is the easternmost county in the country. It's right there close to the border of Canada. A little bit about Washington County, Maine. It is extremely rural with only 32,000 people. And of those 32,000 people, about 3,000 are of the Passamaquoddy tribe. The industry there is primarily natural resource-based, seasonal, physically taxing. There are not a lot of economic opportunities for people outside of that economy. And the poverty rates are extremely high there. The overall poverty rates are around 20%, which are way above the national average. And a particularly shocking statistic is their child poverty rates, which are exceeding 30% in that county. And that is also reflected in their low educational attainment rates, with only 28.5% of their population with an associate's degree or higher. So let's take a look at some of the things that Washington Family Futures Down East has done to address these problems. With that in mind, the real goal of Family Futures Down East was, knowing that they had that high child poverty rate and high family poverty rate was to start listening to the voices of the families themselves, asking them particularly what they needed and what services that would help them achieve economic self-sufficiency. And so through listening to parents, through their Community Caring Collaborative, which is a collaborative of service providers in the county, and through direct focus groups, the parents helped create this backbone of a program that included a number of partners in the county to ensure that their needs, as the parents mentioned, were being met, and that the barriers the parents mentioned were also being addressed. So the first particular need was that parents realized that in order for them to move forward, they needed to start accessing post-secondary education. So creating pathways to accessing that was the first component of their program, partnering with the community colleges and the University of Maine County campus as well. Knowing that they had to access that education was just the first step. In order to do that, they know that they did also, a huge need was to simultaneously have access to high-quality child care so they would have the time to invest in their own education. And so a partnership was made with the local Head Start agency to co-locate their already high-quality child care that they were providing in the county on campus at both of these universities to serve parents who were deciding to take this approach to helping themselves achieve economic self-sufficiency. And by co-locating the Head Start, that gave them options to have child care after hours, child care as they were attending classes. Additionally, that they knew they couldn't stop there, that in order to turn their education into real employability, they wanted to access workforce skills and career pathways to see how they could turn those education opportunities into real jobs. And so that was incorporated into the programming for these families receiving this post-secondary education. They also knew that they had struggled in the past to access resources that allowed them to stay focused on these pathways that they developed. So work was done with other service providers within the community to create a knitted web of services, from transportation to SNAP benefits to other entitlement programs to ensure that these families were getting everything that they needed to ensure that they could stay in school and access those workforce development skills. And they also needed assistance as opposed to being bounced around from service provider to service provider, because they had mentioned that they needed somebody there that could encourage them along their path. And so along with this Weave Together services, they developed a coaching program so that each family had a designated coach to help them navigate these variety of services they were accessing. And in addition, though, as these community partners came together, they were really focusing on removing the barriers that would otherwise prevent them from accessing these services. So creating funds to help access transportation, creating a social network that the parents could rely on each other through this cohort model. So we'll take a look at the next slide and how this came to look in Washington County. So these are some of the partners that were mentioned that were included in this programming: the Washington County Community College, and then the Machias campus of the University of Maine. They were offering a specific family life skills course for the cohort of families that the 32 families that were choosing to take this pathway. So they were a huge partner in this program. Additionally, the Head Start operator in the county, who agreed to co-locate their high-quality education on the campus, was a big partner. The workforce service provider in Washington County was the Career Center for some of the main employment resource center. They were offering career pathways and promoting readiness for family supporting jobs, a key in helping to move families forward. And then the coaching to help these families navigate their path was offered through the Community Caring Collaborative. And all taken together, this network is what made Family Futures Down East. And it was this key collaboration that allowed for the cohorts of the original cohort of family to access all of these services, which is worth noting too, because you see that in attempting to change the landscape of services accessed at the community level, it takes a number of partners working together to put the families first, and this is a really good model of how that was done. So in the next slide, we can see some of the results of that initial cohort. So that initial cohort of 32 families, each of the enrolled adults did earn a 15 to 16 credit out family studies certificate. In addition, each of the children enrolled in the high-quality early education programming also improved in their own child outcomes. The partnerships that we mentioned in the previous slide proved to be the backbone of the project, and they were able to develop strong MOUs between each organization that really laid down the foundation for future cohorts to go through this model that has proved to be successful. And then what's really exciting is now that this model has demonstrated success for the families who first participated, there has been more buy-in from the state level and looking at how the state can improve their policies and programming to better integrate this whole family approach into their program. So the Department of Health and Human Services and Office of Independence has signed a 17-month contract with Family Futures Down East to provide 55% of their budget moving forward with this program. So that is how things have gone in Maine. And now we'll move down the coast a little bit to Maryland, where we'll take a look at how the Allegany County Human Resources Development Commission, which is a community action agency, how they have worked to develop a two-generation program through the Rural Impact Project. So again, let's start with taking a look at the landscape first and the geography of where they were working. Allegheny County, Maryland is one of the two rural westernmost counties in Maryland, alongside Garrett County, which was also a partner with Allegany County in this Rural Impact Project. And it really is in the heart of the Appalachian region of this country. And so a lot of the experiences of the people living there are similar to what a lot of the Appalachian region is seeing these days. A loss of economic opportunity with the loss of jobs, which has then spiraled into this routine, persistent poverty, resulting in low educational attainment, the continued outward migration of young people with no economic opportunity existing in that area, and then also an increase in opioid addiction in the county. Poverty rates in this area are at 16%, and the child poverty rates have exceeded 20%. But the work being done is very, very promising. So the Allegany County Human Resources Development Commission, their two-generation approach is what they call the three-pronged approach. Their first priority is to stabilize persons in crisis, their families in crisis, through a crisis intervention and a no wrong door approach. So if a family is coming to receive services, they're no matter where they go, they are being being exposed to a universal intake form to ensure that they are getting all the services that they qualify for. And then in addition to that, being assessed through a family assessment scale called the Crisis to Thrive Scale, to see not only help them out in crisis, but to help them plan how they can get to thriving, how they can achieve that economic self-sufficiency. So once families are stabilized, the real goal is to then help families and their or individuals identify long-term goals and support them along the way. And that is done by creating a pathway plan that is supported by an integrated data system, providing financial literacy training and the coaching through a coaching model very similar to what was offered in Maine, and also helping families achieve education and career advancement. And then finally, the third approach is to work to remove barriers and create opportunities at the community level. So that comes from economic development, workforce development, working at the policy level to integrate some of these whole family policies at the state level, and building community capacity through building partnerships in the community. One of the really key things to the success of the Allegheny two-generation program has been keeping data at the center. As was mentioned in the previous slide, the first access point that all families who are accessing services is this universal intake form. That universal intake form is made possible through this integrated data system that Allegany has used that allows different programs within the agency to see the same data on the family across, so that all those silos are removed, and it makes it more seamless for the family itself. Beyond that universal intake form, this integrated data system then follows the family all the way through their Crisis to Thrive plan as they're working towards building, achieving outcomes along that scale and working towards self-sufficiency. And having that data integrated along the way it maintains that seamlessness for the families. So some of the important aspects of this data system that are essential to the success of the two-generation program is to make sure that data is the focus of each department within the agency, that when departments are meeting, that data is brought to the forefront, and that there is agreement behind what data is helpful and what is quality, and how each agency is going to use that, of course, to help the family first. How is data going to be used to help the families? And some of the ways that this can be ensured is by what Allegany did was they had a specific position at the agency dedicated to data management, so that as different parts were moving, there was one person to help continuously ensure that data was maintained integrated. Another helpful aspect of this integrated data system is that it generates reports that can then be given to funders to help support the work that is being done at the agency level. It allows for, when you're having cross-department meetings, for different departments to meet about families and look at those outcomes that they're trying to achieve for the families, and similarly look at what services can be provided and bundled together to provide the family everything that they need to move themselves forward. Just like the Family Futures DOWNEAST in Maine, the success of the Allegheny County Human Resources Development Commission's two-generation project was also dependent on partners. For them, they were the core backbone of the agency, but and for them themselves, they had a lot of those different services already embedded within the agency themselves, so that the partnering there was really about breaking down the silos that existed within the agency. But in addition, they also reached out to other community providers within the service, within their community here, as you can see. And so some of the things to keep in mind about this model and what really, because some of you as community action agencies might be thinking, well, how is this different than the work that we're doing now? And these differences might seem subtle, but they really make a big difference in the eyes of the family receiving services. So this snapshot that you see here really demonstrates how those subtle changes create a two-generation approach. And so when you're providing services to your family and you're managing your cases, it's not necessarily, the transition is from case management to family coaching. You're not just managing somebody's case, but you're looking at your clients and the people you're providing service to as a whole family and how you can help them navigate their way through the services that you provide. That sort of speaks to the second point. It's not about the programs that you provide, but it's about the participants' needs and how those needs can be met either from the programs that you provide as an agency or through the partners that you've met in your community to make sure that those needs as identified by the family are being met. And that similarly, that as you're navigating the system alongside your families, it's not just a cold referral, but you're walking alongside of them and passing them through as they achieve their goals. And so it's a seamless integration of goal achievement. And ultimately, you're not just counting heads of who's passed through each program, but you're focused on each family achieving outcomes. And because you have a data system that follows the family, you have those results in front of you. So with all that said, let's take a look at some of the results that Allegany has seen through their work over the past 2 years. Their two-generation programming was really targeted towards all of their families in their Head Start program, which is 315 participating families. And of those 315 participating families, each family member has seen positive movement across all the domains of their assessment scale, the Crisis to Thrive scale. And the greatest increases have been in credit building, family development, and parent engagement, asset building, education, and job skills. So these components that are really key to the long-term economic sustainability of families. So those are huge improvements. Also, through Empower, which is their data sharing platform, HRDC has been able to successfully partner not only break down silos within their agency, but successfully partner outside the agency to guarantee that services are being shared with community partners within their area. And then similarly to the work that was done in Washington County, Maine, the work of HRDC and their partners in Garrett County Community Action Commission, they have been able to build on that success and help guarantee that some of these two-generation models are integrated into the state policy. That's been a huge success. So those are the two programs. One of the really exciting things about the Rural Impact Project is, as you see the differences with Family Futures DOWNEAST in Allegany County, we've got an additional 8 other models that are similar but designed to meet the needs of their own community. So I think that's one of the huge takeaways, is that with the Rural Impact Project, as you're designing a program that meets the needs of your families, it really is going to look different as you try and meet the needs of the communities that you serve. But some of the sort of overall takeaways that each site has left us with is the real key to designing a successful program is guaranteeing that you're including the families in that process. It's all about serving the needs of the families and overcoming the barriers that they previously experienced in accessing services. And the way to do that is to get their feedback in your program design. So in asking the participants what they've learned from their experience in Rural Impact, that is something that each site has emphasized. From that point, in order to guarantee that you're hearing your families that are telling you what their needs are, strong partnerships are essential. So it can't be done alone. In order to break down those barriers that families are perceiving, there needs to be an integrated effort at the community level to make sure that families are able to access the services they need wherever they go, and that comes from strong partnerships. But when you have strong partnerships and you are trying to combine a lot of different stakeholders in order to guarantee that it is a seamless effort, that strong leadership is essential. So for in Allegheny County, it was the Community Action Agency that served as that leader and that backbone for the success of the program at the community level. And what allowed Allegheny to do that was their data-centered approach, because they were letting the data tell the story, and they were using that data to break down those barriers. So that is something that is also vital to the success of the program. And then something that has been wonderful to see, and we've seen both with Family Futures Downeast and Allegany County, is that once this change starts happening at the community level, it then can lead to higher level change. And through the work of both of these sites, they've been able to start moving people at higher levels and start getting people to think about how they can redesign programs so that they better serve the whole family. And then I think one big walk away from all of this is that if you are going to move children and parents out of poverty, that those outcomes need to be considered at every level of service. Those outcomes need to be embedded in each policy and program for the entire agency and for partner agencies. So that is sort of the overview of the experience of our two sites. We today are also releasing this information in a publication, Rural Impact to Cases, which is now available in a draft form on our website here at the Tools and Resources page in our Toolkit and Publication Library. So you can access it through there. We can have a map of, in addition to this draft publication, it is a part of a larger anti-poverty practice series with 3 publications already released. We have a Bundling Services to Improve Outcomes, which is a focus on 3 cases that went through that learning community, the Trauma-Informed Approaches, 3 cases, and then Ready, Set, Go, a guide to facilitating a learning community for state associations thinking about conducting a learning community for agencies at the state level. So all of those publications are also available on our website at our Toolkit and Publication Library. And this is just a guide of how to get there. If you go to Tools and Resources tab and the drop-down menu, you can select the Toolkit and Publication Library where the arrow is pointed to, and then that will take you to that Toolkit and Publication Library. And another place that we have posted this publication as well as our entire anti-poverty practice series is at the Learning Community blog, which is www.lcrcweb.com. And so the information is here to access that. And finally, we have this information posted on the CSBG TNTA Resource Center. So you can access this draft publication and all 3 other anti-poverty practice series publications there. And we want to talk to you about a couple more webinars that we have coming up in the National Webinar Series. The National Webinar Series focuses on themes related to specific anti-poverty approaches and is a way to showcase innovative strategies to the broader CSBG network. So coming up in the Learning Communities National Webinar Series, we have coming up next tomorrow first we have our final Promising Anti-Poverty Series webinar, which will be next week, focusing on the financial empowerment learning community and 3 of the agencies that went through that learning community. And there will also be a publication released alongside that series, so that will be next week on December 4th. In addition, we've got a couple of other webinars that we'll be featuring on our Learning Community National Webinar Series. One will be tomorrow, which will be the Racial Equity Resource Review, which will be an overview of resources pertaining to racial equity and a review of why racial equity is important to the work done by community action agencies. And then also next week, will be featuring Prosperities Now's most recent report highlighting their publication, The Road to Zero Wealth and How the Racial Wealth Divide is Hollowing Out America's Middle Class. So Prosperity Now will be partnering with us to present that report of theirs. And finally, we don't have a slide on it right now, but also next week, on next Thursday, December 7th at 2 o'clock, we will be kicking off our next round of Learning Community Resource Center. So the webinar next Thursday will be talking about the application for the next round of learning communities and providing an overview of what to expect. So this whole anti-poverty practice series really gives you a snapshot of what you can expect to experience and learn through participating in the learning communities. But we'll be talking about that a lot more next Thursday. So this is our Learning Communities Resource Center team. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact any of us here. And we will also open up the floor to questions now. Got both me and Tiffany here to answer any questions you may have about any of the information you heard today. We will take a look at the Q&A and chat.
Okay, so the first question is related to the Allegheny County initiative. You referenced a family assessment scale and a crisis to thrive scale. I'm wondering if that is a resource that can be shared with the network.
Yes, thank you, Christina. That's also, I have an answer to that question that reminds me of additional information that I wanted to share with everybody today. The Family Assessment Scale and the Crisis to Thrive Scale is also available on our Learning Community Resource Center blog, and that is going to be on the Rural Impact Learning Community Center page. You can access that Crisis to Thrive Scale that is available there. But in addition to the publication that was released today, we also have, over the course of the 2-year project, we helped one of the training and technical assistance services that we provided to the Rural Impact Group was cultivating a list of resources that help shape two-generation practices. And so we've compiled a publication highlighting the best of those resources to help various aspects of a two-generation approach. And so that is something that's also being released today and can be found on our toolkit and publication library, as well as the Learning Community Resource Center blog, and includes a lot of resources similar to the Crisis to Thrive scale.
And also, Christina, related to that Crisis to Thrive scale, Liza mentioned that Alleghany partnered very closely with Garrett County Community Action Committee, and they have really been what we call high flyers and thinking about the two-generation approach and the ways that it can play out in the ways that agency engages in collecting the data, analyzing that in cooperation with families. And so there is yet another publication. It is available on the LCRC blog, I think also CSBG TTA Resource Center, called Uplifting the Family. And so within Uplifting the Family, it highlights the work of Garrett County Community Action Committee along with CAP Tulsa, and within that publication provides a little more context about ways in which they utilize the Crisis to Thrive scale to connect to the entire journey of the parents as they are receiving services. And so we would refer that resource to you also. And here's another question coming from Tom Tenerio. Welcome, Tom. Is the MOU that all partners signed off on available as an example of a template? And what I can say about the MOU, because I think you may be referring to what was mentioned about Family Futures Down East. If that's not correct, let me know, but I think that was what you were referring to. And Family Futures Down East has some very, very strong partnerships they can't and wouldn't be able to do that. Really, they're designed to be a convener of local partners, and so that's just kind of how they function. And so we can absolutely connect back with them to see if their specific MOU is available. I do know that it continues to be a work in progress for them as it relates to the whole data sharing piece, because the whole data sharing with external partners adds a whole nother level of complexity due to HIPAA laws as well as FERPA laws, and so, you know, all that has to kind of be navigated. But what we have learned within rural impact is that there is a way to do it, and so for any of us who maybe think that it's not possible to engage in integrated data sharing with partners, that's not the case, but it does require a heavy lift and keen attention, right, to those laws and the nuances of databases and other policies that kind of shape the way that that can occur. And so in terms of the general MOU, we can reach back to Family Futures Down East for a model, but then in addition to that, what we can provide you right now is there is some guidance provided by OPRE, and we'll see if Liza or myself can remember what OPRE's acronym is, but in essence, it's an arm of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's their research arm.
Office of Planning and Research.
Evaluation. Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation. But OPRE has put out several tools related to data interoperability, and there are some sample MOUs that they already have templates, you know, released on that we can pass your way as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
So hopefully that answered your question. Any other questions? That we don't see any more that have come through the Q&A, but we would certainly welcome those. Okay, yes. All right, thank you for that, Tom. So with that said, yeah.
I think that's it. We will be sure to, in addition to having this publication available on the website after today's presentation, we will also post a recording of this presentation alongside the publication, and once the final draft of this publication is complete, we'll just the publication will be released at the same, available in the same location. So keep your eyes out for this recording and the final draft to be made available within the coming week.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. Make it a great day.
Thank you.